The silence of the mansion was shattered by the sound of hurried heels on the marble floor of the hallway. Marina watched through the crack of the kitchen door as two impeccably dressed executives crossed the main living room toward Raphael Sterling's office. Something about those quick steps, that forced urgency, made her stomach clench. At 15, Marina had learned to read people, not through elaborate speeches or rehearsed smiles, but through the small gestures that escaped when they thought no one was watching. And at that moment, watching Marcus Miller and Patricia Hayes ascend the stairs with leather briefcases tucked under their arms, she felt the weight of something wrong hanging in the air. Her mother, Sarah, had worked for the businessman Raphael Sterling for almost 10 years. She had started as a cleaner and had earned the family's trust with silent dedication and unwavering honesty. Marina had grown up in the back of that luxurious property in Beverly Hills, moving between the staff quarters and the endless gardens, always discreet, always observant. Raphael Sterling owned TechVision, one of the largest technology companies in the country. Widowed 5 years ago, he lived only with his staff, immersed in spreadsheets and endless meetings. A fair man, he paid well and treated everyone with respect. Marina admired him from a distance, recognizing in him a loneliness that mirrored her own. On that Saturday in October, however, something different was happening. The mansion had been prepared for a special meeting. Raphael had summoned Marcus and Patricia, his minority partners and right-hand people in the company, to finalize the merger with DataCorp, a deal that would transform TechVision into the absolute market leader. Raphael's excitement had been visible for weeks. This was the culmination of 20 years of work. Marina dried her hands on her apron and walked discreetly down the side corridor. Her mother had taught her to respect the employer's privacy, but curiosity was stronger. She positioned herself near the slightly ajar office door from where she could hear fragments of the conversation. Patricia's voice sounded sweetly persuasive. "Raphael, it's important that we sign today. DataCorp's deadline is inflexible. If we don't close by Monday, they'll back out." Marcus supplemented with studied urgency. "We've reviewed everything 1,000 times, Raphael. It's all perfect. We can't lose this opportunity due to excessive caution." Marina frowned. There was something strange about their haste. Raphael was meticulous, a man of deep analysis. Why were those two so anxious? Suddenly, the door opened completely. Patricia appeared in the doorway, her icy smile contrasting with her hard eyes. "What are you doing here, kid?" Marina swallowed hard. "I was just passing by, sorry." "This is a private business meeting. Go play somewhere else." The word play stung like an insult. Marina was 15, not a child, but she lowered her head and backed away, feeling her cheeks burn. She circled the corridor and positioned herself at a strategic point, hidden behind a column from where she could still partially see the office interior through the reflection of a mirror on the opposite wall. Raphael was sitting at the mahogany desk, his reading glasses balanced on the tip of his nose as he flipped through the thick contract. Marcus and Patricia flanked him on either side, like elegant vultures awaiting the right moment. Patricia pointed to a clause. "See here, Raphael. The share distribution maintains your majority control. 60% for you, 20% for each of us. Exactly as we agreed." Raphael nodded, but his hand hesitated over the pen. Something bothered him. Marina noticed the tension in his shoulders. That's when it happened. Patricia deliberately dropped a document folder next to the desk. Papers fanned out perfectly across the floor. Raphael, instinctively a gentleman, bent down to help collect them. In those few seconds of distraction, Marina saw Marcus execute a quick and precise movement. He opened a black briefcase at his feet, pulled out a contract identical to the one on the desk, and, with almost imperceptible dexterity, swapped the documents. The original contract disappeared inside the briefcase. The new one was positioned in exactly the same spot, at the same angle. Marina's heart pounded. Her hands trembled as she pulled her cell phone from her pocket and activated the camera. She managed to capture 3 photos of the moment Marcus closed the briefcase, but her shaky hands produced blurry images. Still, it was evidence. It was proof. Raphael sat back down, returning the papers to Patricia with a courteous smile. She thanked him with exaggerated theatricality, deflecting any suspicion. "Well, let's finalize this then," Raphael said, picking up the pen. Marina felt panic rise in her throat. She needed to do something. But what? If she screamed, it would just be the word of a teenager against two respected executives. If she stayed quiet, Raphael would sign a fraudulent document without knowing it. Raphael's pen hovered over the signature line. Marina didn't think. She acted. She ran down the corridor toward the kitchen, where her mother was preparing coffee to serve the executives. "Mom! Mom! They switched the contract." Sarah looked up, startled. "What? Marina, what are you talking about?" "I saw it, Mom." Marcus swapped the papers while Mr. Sterling was distracted. "There's something wrong with that contract." Sarah knew her daughter. She knew Marina didn't invent stories, didn't seek attention through lies. The seriousness in her eyes was real. Without further questioning, she wiped her hands and followed her daughter down the corridor. They entered the office without knocking. Raphael looked up, surprised. "Sarah, what happened?" "Mr. Sterling." Sarah's voice trembled, but it was firm. "My daughter saw something you need to know." Marcus stood up abruptly. "This is absurd. This meeting is confidential." Patricia crossed her arms, her smile transformed into a thin, hard line. "Raphael, control your staff. This is bordering on invasion of privacy." But Marina stepped forward, ignoring the intimidation. "Mr. Sterling, I saw Marcus switch the contract. He took another document from the black briefcase and put it in place of the one you were reading. Please, check it again." The accusation hung in the air like broken glass. Marcus let out an exaggerated laugh. "Are you hearing this, Raphael? A child making up fantasies. This is ridiculous." Patricia approached Sarah with a cutting look. "You should be ashamed of allowing your daughter to make this kind of scene. This could cost you your job." Sarah paled but did not back down. "My daughter doesn't lie." Raphael remained silent for long seconds. His eyes moved between Marina, trembling but resolute, and the two partners, who were indignant and overly theatrical. He had known the girl since she was little, always quiet, always honest. Slowly, he picked up the contract. "I'll review it one more time." "Raphael, this is offensive," Marcus protested. "Then there's no problem with me rereading it," Raphael replied, his voice suddenly cold. He began to flip through the pages, this time with redoubled attention. Marina held her breath. Sarah squeezed her daughter's hand, and then Raphael stopped, his eyes fixed on a specific clause. His expression changed. The color drained from his face. "What is this?" Marcus and Patricia exchanged quick glances. Raphael held up the document, his voice rising. "It says here that the share distribution is 20% for me and 40% for each of you. This takes away my control of the company." The silence that followed was deafening. Marina felt her legs weaken with relief. She was right, and Raphael Sterling had just discovered that his most trusted partners had tried to steal everything he had built. Raphael's explosion echoed through the office walls. "You tried to rob me." Marcus raised his hands in a defensive gesture, his expression oscillating between shock and calculated indignation. "Raphael, wait! There must be a printing error. We would never do that." Patricia quickly took control, her voice adopting a professorial, condescending tone. "Exactly. Raphael, you are letting a girl plant paranoia in your head. There was clearly a typo in the document. We have the correct version here in the backup briefcase." Raphael pointed to the black briefcase at Marcus's feet. "Then show me this correct version, now." Marcus hesitated for a fraction of a second, just long enough for Marina to realize he was improvising. With studied movements, he opened the briefcase and pulled out another contract, extending it to Raphael. "Here it is. See, the correct distribution. 60 for you, 20 for each of us." Raphael took the document and compared both, page by page. His jaw was tense, his knuckles white from the pressure. Marina could see the internal battle raging on his face, years of trust clashing with clear evidence of betrayal. "Why would you have two different versions?" Raphael asked, his voice dangerously low. Patricia sighed dramatically. Because we are cautious professionals, Raphael. We always bring backup copies. You know how printers can fail. The wrong version was probably a mistake by the law firm intern. And by chance, that mistake just happens to favor you? Marina couldn't restrain herself. Patricia turned to her with barely contained fury. Girl, you are not qualified to comment on business contracts. Sarah, for God's sake, take your daughter out of here before this becomes even more embarrassing. But Marina stood firm, pulling her cell phone from her pocket. I have photos. I took photos of Marcus switching the documents. Marcus's face hardened. Then show these supposed photos. With trembling hands, Marina opened the gallery and showed the 3 images. They were blurred, out of focus from the urgency and nervousness of the moment. Marcus could be distinguished near the briefcase, but the details were too imprecise to serve as irrefutable proof. Patricia let out a cruel laugh. This? Shaky photos that show nothing? Raphael, this is getting ridiculous. This girl is clearly making up a story to make herself important. Sarah stepped forward, her voice firm despite her visible fear. My daughter doesn't lie. If she says she saw it, she saw it. Marcus crossed his arms, adopting the posture of an offended victim. Raphael, we've worked together for 8 years. We built this company side by side. And you're going to believe the fantasies of a bored teenager instead of trusting your partners? Raphael massaged his temples. The migraine he felt forming was both physical and emotional. Part of him wanted to believe Marcus and Patricia. They were people with whom he had shared successes and failures. But another part, the analytical part that had made him a successful businessman, couldn't ignore the signs. You can go, he finally said, his voice exhausted. I need to think. Raphael, don't be foolish, Patricia pressed. Datacorp's deadline ends Monday. If we don't sign today, we lose the deal of the decade. Then we lose it, Raphael replied dryly. Get out, now. The look Marcus and Patricia exchanged was loaded with venom. Slowly, they gathered their things. Marcus put both contracts back in the black briefcase, closing it with a definitive click. As she passed Sarah and Marina, Patricia stopped. Her voice was an icy whisper intended only for the 2 of them. You just made a terrible mistake. You will regret this. Marina felt a shiver run down her spine, but she kept her chin up. She would not back down from veiled threats. After the partners left, the office plunged into heavy silence. Raphael remained seated, staring fixedly at the empty desk where the contract he had almost signed had rested minutes before. Mr. Sterling, Sarah's voice was soft. I'm sorry if my daughter caused any embarrassment. Raphael raised his hand, interrupting her. No, she may have saved me. Sarah, I trust you. You've never given me reason to doubt you. If your daughter says she saw something, I believe her. Marina felt tears of relief burn her eyes. Raphael stood up and walked to the window, watching the garden, bathed in the golden light of the late afternoon. The problem is, I have no proof. Marcus took both contracts. Without the fraudulent document, it's my word against theirs, and they have excellent lawyers. What about the merger? Sarah asked. Canceled. I can no longer trust them, but that means I'll have to rebuild everything from scratch. TechVision loses months of negotiation. Marina bit her lip, thoughtful. What if we could get a confession? Raphael turned to her, curious. How so? They're arrogant now. They think they won. What if you pretended you changed your mind? That you want to give them a second chance and make the deal? Sarah's eyes widened. Marina, that's dangerous. But Raphael was listening, interest growing in his gaze. Go on. If they really tried to trick you, Marina explained, her confidence growing, they'll be so sure of victory that they might lower their guard. Arrogant people always tell their plans when they think they've already won. I've seen it in movies 1,000 times. Raphael let out a short, humorless laugh. My company is not a movie, Marina. I know, she replied seriously, but people are predictable, especially when greed speaks louder. Raphael considered the suggestion for long minutes. It was risky. It could be seen as a setup. But Marina was right. Without concrete proof, he needed a confession. And he knew Marcus and Patricia well. Both had inflated egos. If they really plotted against him, they wouldn't resist the temptation to boast when they thought they had won. It would have to be very well planned, Raphael murmured, more to himself than to the two women, with reliable witnesses, maybe recordings. Do you know anyone who can help with that? Sarah asked. Raphael nodded slowly. I have a private investigator who has worked for the company before on industrial espionage cases. He would have the necessary equipment. Marina held her breath. Was this really happening? Raphael turned to them with renewed determination. If I'm going to do this, I need absolute certainty. Sarah, would you and Marina have the courage to participate? Sarah looked at her daughter. Marina nodded firmly. Yes, they replied together. Then, tomorrow night, Raphael decided. I'll call Marcus and Patricia saying I've reflected and want to give them a second chance. I'll say I realized I was being paranoid and that I trust them. I'll propose signing an even better agreement with more favorable terms for them. Will they accept? Marina asked. If they're guilty, absolutely. Greed can't resist the possibility of gaining more. And if they're innocent? Sarah pondered. Raphael sighed. Then I will have lost my best partners because of a misunderstanding. But I prefer that certainty to living with doubt. Marina, did you see any other details when Marcus switched the documents? Marina closed her eyes, reliving the scene. He was very fast, but I remember the briefcase had a small sticker in the corner. It looked like a gold logo. Raphael wrote down the information. Any detail could be useful. That night, Marina could barely sleep. In her small house in the back of the property, she tossed and turned as the implications of what she had done hit her. She had challenged two powerful executives. She had put her mother's job at risk. But something inside her, an insistent and clear voice, told her she had done the right thing. The next morning, Raphael called Marcus. The conversation was brief, perfectly staged. Raphael apologized for the outburst the day before, blaming stress and the pressure of the merger. Marcus accepted the request for a new meeting with suspicious enthusiasm. Meanwhile, a discreet man installed hidden microphones and cameras in strategic points of the office. The investigator, named Robert, was professional and silent. He assured Raphael that the equipment was state-of-the-art and undetectable. Everything was prepared. The trap was set. It remained only to be seen if Marcus and Patricia would fall into it. Sunday dawned with a heavy sky over Beverly Hills. Marina woke up to the sunlight streaming through the thin curtains of her room, but it wasn't the glare that woke her. It was the silence, a silence full of possibilities, so different from the suffocating weight of the previous days. Her mother was already in the kitchen when she came down. Sarah was making coffee with automatic movements, but her eyes shone in a way Marina hadn't seen for years. There was hope there, something that had long seemed lost. Good morning, honey. Raphael asked us to have breakfast with him in the main dining room. Marina's eyes widened. The main dining room was the employer's exclusive territory. Staff were never invited into that space. Mom, are you sure? Sarah nodded, still processing the invitation. He insisted. Said he has. Something important to talk to us about. Half an hour later, mother and daughter sat at the polished mahogany table, surrounded by fine crystal and silver cutlery that Marina only knew from afar. Raphael entered wearing casual clothes, very different from the impeccable suits he usually wore. He looked lighter, as if an invisible weight had been lifted from his shoulders. Good morning, Sarah, Marina. Thank you for accepting my invitation. They exchanged uncomfortable glances. They were still not used to being treated as equals in that environment. Raphael poured himself coffee and looked directly at Marina. Last night, after the police took Marcus and Patricia, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about everything that happened. If you hadn't had the courage to speak up, Marina, I would have signed that contract. I would have lost everything I built in 20 years. I just did what was right, sir, Marina murmured, her cheeks flushing. Exactly. You did what was right when it would have been much easier to stay quiet. Do you know how many adults in that room would have that courage? How many people would choose to risk their own mother's job to defend someone they barely... No? Marina lowered her eyes. She hadn't thought of it that way. Sarah, Raphael continued, you raised an extraordinary daughter, and you did it by working tirelessly, often at 2 jobs, to give her the minimum comfort and education. I know because I followed your journey over these 10 years. I saw you come home exhausted and still help Marina with her homework. I saw you refuse days off to save every penny for her future. Tears began to form in Sarah's eyes. Therefore, I have made some decisions, Raphael announced, opening a folder that was on the chair beside him. First decision. Sarah, you are promoted to administrative manager of the mansion. This includes supervision of all staff, supply management, and a salary 5 times higher than the current one, plus full benefits, health insurance, food allowance, and an annual bonus. Sarah covered her mouth with her hands, unable to speak. Second decision. Raphael turned to Marina. You have earned a full scholarship to the Brentwood Academy. It is one of the best private schools in Los Angeles. I have already settled everything with the principal. You start next week. Marina felt the room spin. Brentwood? That school where the children of businessmen, artists, and politicians studied? And third, Raphael pulled a document from the folder. I have created a trust fund in your name, Marina. When you turn 18, you will have access to an amount that will guarantee your college, master's degree, and a good start in life. No matter what you choose to do, you will have the resources to pursue your dreams. I can't accept this. Marina finally found her voice. It's too much. I just did what anyone would do. No, Raphael corrected gently. You did what few people would have the courage to do. And you changed not only my destiny, but potentially that of hundreds of TechVision employees who would have lost their jobs if Marcus and Patricia had taken over. You deserve every penny of this fund. Sarah finally managed to speak. Her voice choked. Mr. Sterling, I don't know how to thank you. Live well. Be happy. That's the only thanks I need. That week, everything changed quickly. News of the attempted fraud leaked to the press, causing a scandal in the corporate world. Marcus and Patricia were formally charged with conspiracy, fraud, and falsification of documents. Their lawyers tried to negotiate, but the recordings were irrefutable evidence. For Marina, the transition to Brentwood Academy was much harder than she had imagined. On the first day, wearing the new uniform that still smelled of the store, she felt all eyes on her. The corridors were different, wider, cleaner. The students talked about international travel, tech product launches, and penthouse parties. She was the girl who came from a public school in the working-class neighborhood, the scholarship student, the intruder. In literature class, when the teacher asked her to introduce herself, Marina kept the description brief. My name is Marina. I'm 15. I like to read. Where did you come from? Asked a blonde, blue-eyed girl in the front row. From John Mendez Public School, Marina replied, lifting her chin. Whispers ran through the room. Marina sat alone in the back, feeling the weight of isolation. The following days were a silent battle. During break time, she sat alone. At lunch, she ate quickly and went to the library. She heard whispered comments about being protected by some businessman, about not deserving to be there, about taking the spot of someone more qualified. One afternoon, in gym class, 3 girls surrounded her in the locker room. So, is it true you live in a businessman's house? Asked the leader, a tall brunette named Julia. I lived in the back of the property with my mother, Marina corrected. She worked there. Your mother is a maid? Julia exchanged meaningful glances with her friends. How interesting. And how did you get the scholarship here? Must have been out of pity. Anger boiled in Marina's chest, but she took a deep breath. I got it because I stopped 2 criminals from stealing everything from my mother's boss. And because, unlike some people I know, the value of doing the right thing even when it's hard. Julia shrugged. What a nice story. But in the end, you're still just the maid's daughter. Marina could have retaliated. She could have used harsh words, but she chose something different. She looked Julia in the eyes and replied calmly, "And you're still just someone who needs to put others down to feel important. I think I know who's in a better situation." And she walked out of the locker room with her head held high, leaving Julia speechless. The turning point happened during philosophy and ethics class, 3 weeks after her enrollment. The teacher, a middle-aged man named Dr. Anthony Meadows, proposed a debate on moral dilemmas. He presented a hypothetical scenario. If you witnessed something wrong involving someone powerful, knowing that speaking up would put you and your family at risk, what would you do? The class was divided. Some argued that protecting the family came first. Others defended that the truth should always prevail. But their answers sounded rehearsed, theoretical, empty of real experience. Marina remained quiet until the teacher called her directly. "And you, Marina? What would you do?" She took a deep breath. "I'm going to tell a true story. My story." And then, for the first time since she entered that school, Marina opened up completely. She talked about being 15 and working in the back of a mansion, about watching a betrayal unfold, about the impossible choice between safety and truth, about trembling with fear but acting anyway. The room fell into absolute silence. When she finished, the eyes of several classmates were shining. Even Julia seemed shaken. That's the difference between discussing ethics in a classroom and living ethics in the real world, Marina concluded. In the real world, doing the right thing can cost you everything you have, and sometimes you have to do it anyway. The teacher smiled, pride evident in his expression. "Thank you for sharing that with us, Marina. You just gave us the most valuable lesson this semester. Moral courage is not the absence of fear, but action despite it." When the bell rang, something changed. Lucas, a shy boy who always sat alone, approached her. "That was the most incredible story I've ever heard. You're really brave." And then Sophia, one of the most popular girls, stopped next to Marina. "Can I have lunch with you today? I want to hear more." Even Julia, as she passed, mumbled an almost inaudible apology. Marina realized she had finally found her place. Not through wealth or connections, but through something much more valuable: authenticity. That night, returning home, now no longer in the back but in a spacious apartment that Raphael had insisted on providing, Marina told her mother everything. Sarah hugged her daughter, tears of pride streaming down her face. "You are doing exactly what I always knew you would do, my daughter. Changing the world, one truth at a time." 3 months had passed since the day Marina exposed Marcus and Patricia. Life had assumed a new normal, still strange but progressively comfortable. Marina excelled academically at Brentwood Academy, surpassing even students who had studied there since childhood. Sarah flourished in her new position, managing the mansion efficiently and earning the respect of the entire team. Raphael, in turn, had completely restructured TechVision. He brought in new partners, implemented transparency policies, and created an ethics council. The company not only survived the scandal but prospered, its reputation strengthened by the way it handled the internal betrayal. It was on a cold Tuesday in July that everything changed again. Marina opened the apartment mailbox and found, among utility bills and advertisements, an envelope with no return address. Thick cream paper, with her name typed in an impersonal font. Something about the anonymity of that correspondence made her stomach clench. She went up to the apartment and opened the envelope with trembling fingers. Inside, a single sheet with words typed in capital letters. "You shouldn't have gotten involved. Curious girls have accidents. Be careful when crossing the street. Be careful what you eat. Be careful who you trust. We are watching." Marina's hands trembled so much that the sheet fell to the floor. The apartment, so cozy minutes before, suddenly seemed vulnerable. Every window was a possible observation point. Every shadow hid a threat. "Mom!" she called, her voice coming out higher than intended. Sarah emerged from the kitchen, her apron still tied around her waist. When she saw her daughter's expression and the letter on the floor, her face paled. What happened? Marina pointed to the paper. Sarah picked it up and read it, the color completely draining from her cheeks. We need to call Raphael, now. 20 minutes later, they were in the mansion office. Raphael read the letter 3 times, his jaw growing tenser with each reading. Robert, the private investigator, had already been summoned and was analyzing the envelope with latex gloves. No fingerprints, Robert announced after a few minutes. Common paper, sold in any stationery store, standard envelope. Whoever sent it knew what they were doing. Marcus and Patricia are awaiting trial, Raphael pondered. They couldn't have sent this personally. They don't have to, Robert replied darkly. People like them have contacts, allies, and when they get desperate behind bars, they make dangerous deals. Marina felt fear tighten her throat. Do they want to scare me into retracting my testimony? Or they want revenge, Robert said frankly. Marina, you publicly humiliated them. You destroyed their plans. Arrogant people like them don't forget that. Sarah pulled her daughter into a protective embrace. She's not going anywhere alone. I'll pick her up from school, accompany her everywhere. Raphael nodded. And I'll hire private security. Discreet but effective. Robert, I want the best people on this job. I already know who to call, Robert confirmed. But Marina pulled away from her mother's embrace, her expression hardening. No, I won't hide. If I show fear, they win. The whole letter is based on intimidation because they know they can't reach me without serious consequences. Marina, this is not a game, Raphael warned. These threats could be real. I know, but living in fear isn't really living either. Marina crossed her arms, determination overriding the terror. I accept discreet security, but I won't change my routine. I won't give them the satisfaction of seeing me cower. Robert studied the 15-year-old girl before him. She possessed a backbone he rarely saw even in seasoned executives. His wife would have liked her, he thought with a pang of longing. So here's what we'll do, Robert decided. 24-hour security, but as you requested, discreet. You continue your normal routine, but you will always be protected. And David will investigate where this letter came from. If Marcus and Patricia are behind this, we will prove it and add more charges against them. The following weeks were tense. Marina kept her word, attending school normally, but she constantly felt the presence of the security detail. A middle-aged man who sat at the coffee shop across from the high school. A woman who always seemed to be on the same bus. Protection she had learned to recognize and, strangely, appreciate. David discovered that 3 similar letters had been sent. One to Marina, one to Susan, and one to Robert, all with the same threatening content, all equally impossible to trace. Marcus and Patricia's trial was approaching. The prosecution had built a solid case based on the recordings and evidence of fraud, but the closer the date got, the more frequent the threats became. Anonymous phone calls in the middle of the night, cars that seemed to follow them, an atmosphere of constant tension. It was then that Marcus, through his lawyer, made an unexpected request. He wanted a visit from Marina in prison. Absolutely not, was Susan's immediate response. But Marina looked thoughtful. Why? Why does he want to see me? Probably to intimidate you personally, Robert suggested, to make you drop your testimony. Or, David pondered, to make a deal. Desperate criminals sometimes try to negotiate. Marina made a decision that surprised everyone. I'll go. Honey, no, Susan protested. Mom, listen, if I don't go, I'll always wonder what he wanted to say. And I'll keep being afraid of shadows. But if I go, look him in the eye. Maybe I can finally put this behind me. You won't go alone, Robert decreed. I'll go with you. And I will too, David added, with recording equipment. Anything he says can be used as evidence. The following Saturday, Marina, Robert, and David presented themselves at the penitentiary. The gray, imposing building seemed to suck the daylight out of the air. They were led down narrow corridors to a visiting room with a metal table and uncomfortable chairs. When Marcus walked in, Marina barely recognized him. The elegant, arrogant executive she had known had transformed into a thin, pale man with deep circles under his eyes. The orange prison uniform hung loosely on his body. He sat down across the table, his handcuffs clinking. His eyes, once full of cruel confidence, now seemed empty. "Thank you for coming." His voice was hoarse, as if unused. "What do you want, Marcus?" Robert asked coldly. Marcus stared intently at Marina. "I wanted you to know something. The threats didn't come from me." Marina leaned forward. "Then who? From people much worse than me." Marcus ran his trembling hands through his thinning hair. "When Patricia and I planned the scheme, we weren't alone. There were other investors, people who put money into the scheme, people who expected a return. And when you failed, those people lost their investment," David concluded. "Worse." Marcus looked around nervously, as if the walls had ears. "These people don't accept failure. They want compensation. And they blame you," he indicated Marina, "for exposing the scheme." Marina felt a chill run down her spine. Who are these people? Businessmen who launder money through fake businesses. Marcus lowered his voice. "Connected, dangerous people. Patricia and I were just pawns, small operators in a much larger scheme." "And why are you telling me this?" Marina asked suspiciously. Because for the first time in months, something that might have been remorse crossed Marcus's face. "You saved me." "How?" Marina couldn't hide her surprise. If we had managed to steal Tech Vision, the next step would have been to hand everything over to these investors, and when they found out the company was worth less than we promised, or when they wanted to eliminate witnesses, Marcus swallowed hard, Patricia and I would have been discarded, possibly permanently. "You're saying your life would have been in danger?" Robert leaned back, processing the revelation. "I'm saying we would already be missing." Marcus looked directly at Marina. "When you publicly exposed the scam, you destroyed the entire scheme. The investors retreated into the shadows. They couldn't risk being discovered. Patricia and I were arrested, but at least we're alive. And the threats?" David pressed. "They are real, but they will come from afar, through intermediaries. They want to scare you, but they won't risk direct exposure." Marcus looked at Marina intensely. "You need to be careful, but you also need to know that you inadvertently did the right thing. For you, for Robert, and even for Patricia and me." Marina studied the man across from her. She didn't see the arrogant monster who had tried to steal everything from Robert. She saw a broken human being confronting the consequences of his choices. "That doesn't absolve you of what you did," she said calmly. "You still tried to destroy a good person." "I know, and I'll pay for it. But I wanted you to know the full truth, and I wanted to thank you, even if it's strange to thank the person who put you in prison." Marina stood up. "You're not thanking me for being imprisoned. You're thanking me for being alive." "Exactly." Leaving the penitentiary, Marina took a deep breath of the fresh air. Robert placed a hand on her shoulder. "How are you?" She thought for a moment, strangely at peace. "Now I know what we're fighting against, and I know we did the right thing." "And the threats?" David asked. "They are still real, but now we know they come from cowards hiding in the shadows." Marina lifted her chin. "And I'm not afraid of shadows." 1 year. 12 months since that day Marina watched through the crack in the door and decided to act. 12 months that completely transformed not only her life, but the lives of everyone around her. Marcus and Patricia's trial finally came to an end. Both were sentenced to 8 years in prison for corporate fraud, document forgery, and conspiracy. Their assets were confiscated to compensate previous victims who, as investigations revealed, numbered in the dozens. The scheme was much larger than Robert had imagined. The threats gradually ceased. David tracked down some of the intermediaries and, with police help, managed to identify 2 of the scheme's investors. They retreated overseas, and the anonymous letters stopped arriving. Security around Marina was reduced, although Robert insisted on maintaining discreet surveillance for a few more months. Marina was now in her sophomore year of high school, one of the best students in her class. She had earned not only academic respect but true friendships. Lucas had become her best friend, study partner, and confidant. Sophia organized a discussion group on business ethics inspired by Marina's story. Even Julia, the girl who had intimidated her at first, became an ally, recognizing that her initial prejudice stemmed from her own insecurities. It was on an October morning, exactly 1 year after the events, that Robert called Marina and Susan for a special meeting. They arrived at the mansion expecting some administrative matter. They didn't expect to find a hall full of people. Journalists, businessmen, Tech Vision employees, and even some teachers from Northwood High filled the space. A huge banner on the main wall announced the Marina Miller Institute for Education and Opportunity. Marina stopped, speechless. My name? Robert approached with a genuine smile, the kind of smile Marina hadn't seen on him since before his wife passed away. Your name, Marina, because you represent everything this institute stands for: courage, integrity, and the belief that character matters more than background. But I don't understand. Marina looked around, trying to process. Susan, equally surprised, had tears streaming down her face. Robert led them to the small stage set up in the center of the hall. Ladies and gentlemen, he began, addressing the audience. A year ago, a 15-year-old girl saved my company. But she did more than that. She reminded me that integrity is not a matter of age, money, or social position. It's a matter of choice. Applause echoed through the hall. That's why, Robert continued, I decided to create this nonprofit institute. The goal is to identify and support talented young people from low-income backgrounds, offering full scholarships, professional mentorship, and support so they can reach their maximum potential. We already have partnerships with 20 elite private schools and 15 companies committed to offering internships. Marina felt her legs weaken. Robert gently guided her to the microphone. Marina, would you like to say a few words? She looked at the crowd, all those expectant faces, waiting for her to say something inspiring, something memorable. But Marina was never one for grand speeches. She was just a girl who had done what she thought was right. She took a deep breath and began. A year ago, I was invisible. Not to my mother, who always saw and loved me, but to the world. I was the maid's daughter, someone who circulated through the back entrances of houses, through service corridors, always on the periphery of other people's lives. The hall was in absolute silence. When I saw those two men trying to steal everything from Mr. Robert, my first reaction was fear. Fear that no one would believe me. Fear of losing the only stable home I had known. Fear of being wrong and ruining everything. Marina paused, emotions threatening to spill over. But then I realized something. If I stayed quiet out of fear, I would be complicit. And silent complicity is as destructive as the wrong action. So I spoke up, trembling, with blurry photos and no solid proof. But I spoke, because it was the right thing to do. Several members of the audience nodded, absorbing every word. What I learned this year wasn't that courage is the absence of fear. It was that courage is acting despite paralyzing fear. And I learned that each of us, no matter how young, how poor, how invisible the world makes us feel, has power. The power to choose integrity. The power to stand up for what is right. The power to change destinies. Marina looked at Robert, then at her mother, then back at the audience. This institute shouldn't have my name. It should have the name of all the invisible people who make courageous choices every day, of the mothers who work exhaustively to give their children a future, of the young people who study by candlelight because they believe education is liberation, of the people who choose honesty even when lying would be easier. Tears were now running freely down Susan's face. But if my name can inspire someone, some girl or boy who feels invisible, to believe that they too can change their destiny through correct choices, then I accept. Marina looked directly at the cameras present. To you who are watching and feel small, forgotten, unimportant, You matter. Your choices matter. Your voice matters. Don't let anyone convince you otherwise. The ovation was deafening. In the following weeks, the Marina Miller Institute became operational reality. The first class included 50 young people selected from underserved communities in the city. Each received a full scholarship, complete school supplies, uniform, transportation, and 3 meals a day. More than that, they received mentors, successful professionals who committed to guiding them. The impact was immediate and profound. Stories began to emerge. John, 13, from the inner city, passionate about math but without access to adequate books, was now studying at the same high school as Marina. Beatrice, 15, from a family of recyclers, dreamed of being a doctor and now had all the necessary support to pursue that dream. The media covered the project extensively. Marina was invited for interviews, television programs, and lectures. Each appearance was an opportunity to amplify the message. Talent is distributed equally, but opportunity is not. Robert, inspired by the success, convinced other businessmen to create similar institutes. A national movement began to take shape, focused on identifying and developing forgotten talents. On a December afternoon, Christmas Eve, Robert asked Marina and Susan to come to the mansion for one last surprise of the year. "You two changed my life," he said simply, "and I want to give back in a concrete and lasting way." He handed them 2 envelopes. Susan opened hers first. Inside, the deed to a 3-bedroom apartment in a highly valued neighborhood of the city, completely paid off in her name. Susan covered her mouth, unable to speak. Marina opened the second envelope. It was documentation for a robust investment fund, with enough value to guarantee not only her complete education, but a comfortable start to life. Accessible when she turned 18, but with provisions for emergencies before then. "Mr. Robert, I can't," Marina began. "You can, and you will," Robert interrupted gently. "You gave me back something I thought I lost when my wife passed away. Faith in human goodness. There is no monetary value for that. Accept these gifts not as payment, but as a symbol of eternal gratitude." That night, in their new apartment, Marina was on the balcony watching the city lights. Susan joined her, bringing 2 cups of hot chocolate. "What are you thinking about, honey?" Marina smiled. "I'm thinking that a year ago I was an invisible girl afraid of everything. And today I'm someone who might have helped change the world, even if just a little bit." "You changed much more than a little bit." Susan put her arm around her daughter's shoulders. "You inspired a movement. You created hope where there was resignation." They stood in silence for a moment, absorbing the transformation of their lives. "Mom," Marina asked suddenly, "do you regret anything? All the difficulties we went through?" Susan thought carefully before answering. "I don't regret the difficulties, because they made us who we are. But I regret every time I made you feel that being poor was a reason for shame. Because now I see that what really matters was never how much money we had, but how much dignity we maintained." Marina hugged her mother. "You always maintained our dignity, Mom. Always." Across town, Robert Miller sat alone in his office, looking at the photo of his late wife on the desk. "Anne," he whispered to the image, "I think you would have liked her. Marina, she has your spirit, your courage." And for the first time in 5 years, Robert felt that maybe, just maybe, it was okay to keep living, keep building, keep believing. A year after that fateful day, 3 lives had been completely transformed, not just through money or position, but through something much deeper. The reaffirmation that integrity, courage, and kindness still mattered in a world that often suggested otherwise. Marina would continue studying, growing, inspiring. Susan would continue working, now with fully recognized dignity. Robert would continue building, not just companies, but bridges between worlds that rarely touched. And somewhere, a young girl who felt invisible would watch Marina's story and think, "If she could do it, I can too." And maybe, just maybe, that would be the greatest transformation of all. End of story. If Marina and Susan's journey touched your heart, if you believe that courage and integrity can truly change destinies, I have a special request for you. We have many other moving stories about ordinary people making extraordinary choices, about transformations that begin with a single act of courage. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any of these inspiring narratives. Leave a like if Marina's story moved you. And most importantly, tell us in the comments, have you ever had to make a difficult choice between safety and doing what is right? Your story can inspire others. Remember, you matter. Your choices matter. Your voice matters. Never forget that.